Hello and welcome. This is the Daily Report for Friday, October 22nd. Air travel is taking flight with more countries opening up their borders as vaccination rates pick up pace. Having said that, we explore ways to ensure a safe travel campaign amid a new normal with COVID-19 later on in the program. We start now with the pandemic updates with our Kwon Soa. Now, Soa, how are we ending the work week?
Well, Sunny, there is hardly any change from the figure we had on Thursday, which means for the first time in 14 weeks, Friday's figure has dropped to below 1,500. 1,440 cases have been counted as of 12 a.m. That is a drop in domestic transmissions, but also a slight rise in imported cases. Now, for 14 straight days, Korea is posting less than 2,000 infections. And also, when we compare today's figure to last Friday, it's an on-week decline by around 240 infections. Now, with the cases hovering between the low 1,000s and a little over 1,600, the average number of domestic transmissions in the past week has fallen to 1,354. Now, around 80% of infections this Friday have occurred in the capital region. A similar figure in Seoul and Gyeonggi-do province. Triple digit remains in the city of Incheon. Meanwhile, all 17 provinces or major cities have reported at least one COVID-19 case. Now, that brings Korea's total to 348,969, and here a concerning double-digit figure of deaths were reported in the past day, raising the death toll to 2,725. Now, good news is that on the vaccination front, we've got almost 80% now that have been receiving at least one dose of COVID-19 vaccine. And also, we are approaching 70% when it comes to the number of people who are fully vaccinated. Let's move over abroad. We've got now a rise by almost 470,000 new infections in the past day, and also more than close to 7,700 new fatalities. If we move over to some specific countries here, the UK has reported over 52,000 new cases in a day, raising the total to 8.6 million. And Russia also saw more than 36,000 new infections. And Germany is seeing resurgences as well, with more than 18,000 infections, 17,800 to be exact, reported in the past day. And those are the general updates I have for now, but I'll see you back in a bit. Sunny?
All right, Soa, thank you for now. Right, so as Soa pointed out, with transmissions slowing and vaccinations rising, health authorities here are poised to push ahead with their exit plan from the pandemic come next month. And for more on this, I have our Kim Yeon-sung here. As always, Yeon-sung, welcome back.
Happy to be here.
Right, so let's begin with some updates regarding our transition into normality.
Well, until now, the details of this living with COVID-19 scheme was kind of cloaked in mystery, but Prime Minister Kim Boo-kyum dropped some hints on what this scheme is going to look like. He said that they'll start by loosening restrictions for businesses that have taken the biggest hit from COVID-19 and those that present a relatively low risk of virus transmissions. He has yet to specify which businesses, but we can infer that the plan is going to focus on small and local establishments, as well as those in the travel or cultural sectors. Actually, some city governments are already taking their own initiative to revive the tourism industry. Like the city of Sejong, for instance, they're bringing back their city bus tours for the first time since July. But the Prime Minister also warned the public that now is not the time to rush into hasty action. Take a listen to what he said.
When we see the experiences of other countries, it's clear that this situation is a moment of crisis with hope. It's a challenging task we have to prepare meticulously. We have to carefully take it step by step as we head down this unknown path.
More details on this plan are to be announced during a public hearing next Monday. They'll also be soliciting feedback on ways to ease social distancing measures while staying vigilant in stopping the virus.
Right. Yeon-sung, do tell us a bit more about the Prime Minister's reference to the experience of other countries.
Well, it is concerning because some countries that have already pressed ahead with the living with COVID-19 scheme are seeing record surges within their COVID-19 infections. For example, UK topped 50,000 cases for the first time in 3 months. The surge there was partly fueled by a newly identified variant. And now this strain is a spin-off from the Delta, and it's sparking concern over whether this strain is more transmissible and more resistant to the vaccines than the Delta. This variant has also been found in Israel as well. Russia is seeing record deaths and cases, and President Putin actually responded to this by ordering a 9-day-long shutdown in workplaces. Singapore's health system is overwhelmed, with a majority of their isolation rooms and ICUs filled as well. So this surge is rather surprising, considering that COVID-19 cases worldwide have actually been on the decline for the last 7 weeks. Top WHO official Mike Ryan on Thursday actually attributes this surge to the eased COVID-19 restrictions. He says that there has been an increase of indoor social gatherings that came with a drop in outdoor temperatures. So you can see why South Korea is trying to tread lightly with these COVID-19 measures.
Right. And I suppose the resurgences in the countries that you mentioned, the UK, Russia, Singapore, they're putting perhaps a very heavy toll on frontline healthcare workers.
Exactly. And I'm glad that you mentioned the healthcare workers, because there was actually a very grim report released by WHO as of Thursday. The WHO estimates that this virus could have killed 80 to 180,000 healthcare workers between January and last year and May of 2021. And along with this figure, the WHO highlighted the growing vaccine discrepancy between low and high income countries. 8 in 10 healthcare workers have been vaccinated in high income countries. In contrast, fewer than 1 in 10 healthcare workers were vaccinated in Africa. A senior WHO official warned that this could cause a pandemic to drag into next year, and it's imperative that vaccines are evenly distributed throughout healthcare workers in low-income countries as well.
Of course, because we are fighting a global health crisis. All right, Yunsen, thank you for now, but stay with us for the extended talk.
Thank you.
Right, authorities here are on high alert as they seek to keep a tight rein on transmission trends as the country gears to shift into a new normal. I have Soa back at the desk with more on the government's latest COVID-19 assessment. Soa, right?
Right, Sunny. We had a number of holidays this fall season, including Chuseok, Korea's autumn harvest, and also National Foundation Day and Hangul Day, Hangul meaning Korea's alphabet, of course. But one special day is also coming up that's not a national holiday, but which is also keeping health authorities on extreme high alert.
And you are probably talking about Halloween, Soa.
Exactly, Sunny. So Halloween is coming up, and in recent years, more and more Koreans have been flocking to the streets to celebrate Halloween. But the streets were quite empty last year, 2020, and that, of course, over fears that the COVID-19 virus spreads further. But what's going to be different this year is that there will be more vaccinated people and also more younger people that are vaccinated. So authorities have decided on a Halloween antivirus period from October 27th to November 2nd, during which the Ministry of Food and Drug Safety, the National Police Agency, and local governments will jointly make inspections at nightlife entertainment venues and pubs, especially around popular districts like Itaewon, Hongdae, and Gangnam Station in the capital Seoul, where many young people as well as foreigners gather during Halloween festivities. The government warned of strict punishments in case social distancing measures are violated.
We will
take a zero-tolerance stance on foreigners who breach prevention rules by seeking their deportation, as well as fines and restrictions on businesses that abet these violations.
So what's quite interesting is that the government has been really emphasizing that foreigners won't be discriminated when it comes to vaccinations or getting tested for COVID-19. But in this case, they seem to be quite stern. And so which social distancing measures are they particularly talking about? It is keeping their masks on, abiding by the ban on private gatherings of more than 4 people or 8 people, depending on how many people in that group are vaccinated or not. not. And also government officials have been asking to refrain from going to confined facilities and also from chanting or singing together during this Halloween season. And especially this goes for people that are not fully vaccinated.
Right. So for those who are vaccinated, though, I think a total of 8 people, is it so, can gather regardless of the time, provided the party includes 4 who are fully vaccinated.
Right. In the capital region and in other places up to 10.
Right. Well, let's hope for a safe celebration then, as we hope to transition out of the pandemic. And speaking about transitioning out of the pandemic, so what's the latest from the special committee in charge of that transition?
Right, Sunny. So an official at the Health Ministry, Lee Ki-il, had some more details on the meeting held by government civilian panel for the phased return to our daily lives. Now, following a draft release expected during a public hearing on Monday, as Yeon-seung earlier explained, on the 27th, so that would be Wednesday, another meeting is to be held, and that will discuss comprehensive details with an announcement to the public slated for next Friday. Now, here's just a glimpse of what we can expect starting in November.
We have decided to maintain our basic set of prevention rules that includes mask wearing. We're also looking to draw up a contingency plan to deal with any emergencies like a surge in the number of seriously ill patients and deaths. We will review the possible lifting of operating hour restrictions for restaurants, cafes and other businesses as part of the first phase in our transition in early November.
Now, also what the government is planning to do, and what's also been mentioned by Prime Minister Kim Boo-kyum earlier, is introducing so-called vaccine passes. But the Prime Minister said that officials will make sure that people who cannot be vaccinated won't be neglected in this system. So that would be people that cannot be vaccinated due to certain health issues, and also children or some teenagers. And regarding that, the Prime Minister also mentioned that it's not going to be only vaccine passes that will be introduced, but also a system where people can show that they have proven negative for the COVID-19 virus in the past 48 days. So they will have to take PCR tests so that they can go to certain venues, although they do not have vaccine passes.
Right, so they are given the option to hand in or submit a negative PCR test.
Right, that's what's planned, but the announcement will still have to come.
Right, we'll still have to wait for the details then.
Yes.
Right, well, efforts to transition out of the pandemic are also taking place in different parts of the world, as we mentioned throughout this week. And one of those countries is neighboring Japan. I turn back to Yeon-seung now to tell us, who will tell us a bit more about the efforts there.
Well, Japan is one step ahead of South Korea in implementing these COVID-19 schemes. And it's actually quite stunning in recent cases because they saw a very dramatic drop in COVID-19 infections. I'm sure you remember ahead of the Olympics, they were seeing cases that were reaching over 10,000, if I'm remembering correctly. And these officials were very worried these surges would continue for the rest of the year. But actually, Tokyo, the capital city of Japan, has seen fewer than 50 cases per day for 5 days straight. So some of the most populated cities in Japan, Tokyo and Osaka, are pulling all restrictions on operation hours and alcohol services in bars and restaurants, as long as these establishments meet the government-set requirements for COVID-19 prevention. But of course, there's still a 4-person limit to how many people can gather at one table. Tokyo is a very vivacious city in itself, and there's a lot of avid Halloween partygoers. So health officials are also concerned there that these partygoers are going to spark a new outbreak. So you can see, even with the dramatic drop in cases, that Japan is still trying to tread lightly with their easing COVID-19 measures.
Which is completely understandable. And so let's wrap up today's extended talk with information about our vaccination drive. Now, you mentioned earlier that those fully inoculated in the country would stand at 68% of the population. Tell us a bit more about when we'll reach 70%.
Well, 70%, that could happen as early as tomorrow, so Saturday. That's what Prime Minister Kim Boo-kyum earlier mentioned. And also the KDCA has been recently saying that it could happen between the 23rd and the 25th. So that goal is likely to be achieved in the coming days. And 70% used to be mentioned a lot as a key criteria in reaching herd immunity. But now, as we have the Delta variant factor and also the planned easing of restrictions, as well as other countries' example of surging cases, more people will have to get vaccinated than 70%. And health officials are still encouraging a further cooperation from the nation's people to go beyond that 70% threshold. So during yesterday's government briefing, there were questions raised about when Korea could reach 85% in vaccinating the nation's people. And an official said that with the vaccinations for pregnant women and adolescents, we are expected to reach that 80% goal. And also we've got more than 90% of the nation's senior population already fully vaccinated. So he did not make a specific when we can get to 85%, but it looks like the 80% mark is expected to be reached. Meanwhile, another official stressed that starting yesterday, for people who have missed the chance to get their second shot according to their schedule, they can get those just on the day they want to go now. So that has been made an easier process now.
Right, that's quite convenient then. All right, so as always, thank you very much for that. I'll see you on Monday. And Yeonsung, it's been a great week. We'll see you back in about a month, I think.
Thank you.
All right. The launch was a success, but the mission was not. But South Korea's position within the elite space club has been secured. In today's news segment, we start with Nuri's blast into space on Thursday. Chang Tae-yeon reports.
South Korea's first homegrown rocket, Nuri, went 700 kilometers above Earth Thursday evening, although the mock payload it was carrying could not reach its intended destination.
The dummy satellite reached the altitude of 700 kilometers, but it couldn't target a lower orbit because the speed was less than 7.5 kilometers per second. Nuri's first stage separation, fairing separation, and second stage separation were done right. But the 7-ton engine in the third stage could not combust for 521 seconds. Rather, it ended after 475 seconds.
And this means the engineers have found which parts they need to develop before the next launches. The country will hold a committee, including Korean engineers and outside experts, to find out the reason behind the early end in the third stage. Nuri launched on Thursday at 5 p.m. after an hour delay at Naro Space Center in Goheung County, southern South Korea. 4 more launches are already scheduled, and the next one is in May next year. The rocket launch is not a one-time event, but rather just one stage in developing the technology. So regardless of the result, we have to encourage the engineers and scientists who have worked so hard to develop a space vehicle from scratch. Chang Tae-yeon, Arirang News, Goheung.
Now, the Nuri rocket may have stopped short of delivering a dummy satellite into orbit, but experts involved in the launch say lessons are being learned. Choi Min-jung explains.
The first launch of South Korea's homegrown space rocket, Nuri, is seen as a meaningful achievement by the companies that participated in its development. Although Nuri fell short of putting a dummy satellite into orbit, the companies have vowed to use the launch as a stepping stone to becoming a leader in the space industry. One of the biggest contributors to the project, Hanwha Aerospace, said Nuri was created using South Korea's long-term vision and an unwavering will for success in the space industry. The company vowed to strengthen the country's presence in the space industry by utilizing its experience and technology that has been accumulated by participating in various projects since the 1990s to the latest launch of Nuri. Hyundai Heavy Industries, which manufactured Nuri's launch pad, said that it was meaningful to participate in the project. The company added that it will do its best to contribute to the development of Korea's aerospace industry through continuous technological improvements. Hyundai Rotem, which was responsible for Nuri's testing facilities, recognized the importance of the space industry, saying it has infinite potential. Thanks to contributing to Nuri's testing facilities, the company says it was able to improve its technical skills. Industry watchers expect the launch of Nuri to serve as an opportunity for South Korea to make a new leap forward in the global space race led by private companies. Choi Min-dang, Arirang News.
In line with plans for a comprehensive global tax reform in the year 2023, the US and 5 European countries have finally settled their dispute over digital taxes targeting American tech giants. Our Kim Hyo-sun has more.
The US and 5 European nations have sealed a deal to resolve a prolonged trade dispute over digital taxes on some of America's tech giants. Bloomberg reported Thursday that the joint statement, issued by the US, Britain, France, Italy, Spain, and Austria, states that they've agreed to transition from the existing digital services taxes to the new multilateral solution. It adds they've committed to hold constructive dialogue on the digital services tax that is largely aimed at big U.S. tech firms such as Google, Facebook, and Amazon. Under the deal, the 5 European nations will keep their current digital taxes in place until the OECD-brokered Global Tax Agreement comes into force in 2023. Nevertheless, they've agreed to withdraw their digital services tax schemes as part of a sweeping global tax deal agreed earlier this month by nearly 140 countries to adopt a 15% global minimum corporate tax and grant some taxing rights on large profitable companies to market countries. In exchange, Washington agreed to drop its planned tariff retaliation against the 5 countries. Following the agreement, U.S. Trade Representative Catherine Tai said Washington will continue to work with the 5 governments to ensure the deal's smooth implementation, as well as a rollback of the existing digital tax schemes. Kim Hyo-sun, Arirang News.
Back on the local front, Seoul's foreign ministry has disclosed some specific details regarding the possible use of a fund set up by Japan to support surviving South Korean victims of Japan's wartime atrocities. Our Kim Da-mi reports.
Seoul has consulted with Tokyo on various practical ways to resolve Japan's wartime sexual slavery issue, including what should be done with the remaining balance of the around $8 million contributed by Japan to the 2015 Comfort Women deal. Seoul's Foreign Minister Chung Eui-yong said this to lawmakers during a parliamentary audit on Thursday when asked if the $4.8 million left in the fund could be used for memorials for the victims. South Korea has long stressed that the deal was a political agreement that did not consider the opinions of the victims or citizens, saying that the deal does not resolve the 2 countries' historical issue. So far, over $3.7 million of the fund has been handed over to the victims, leaving around $4.8 million. Jung noted that Japan has been strongly opposed to using the funds for anything other than being distributed to the victims. He said the 2 countries are instead looking at other options, such as creating an $8 million gender equality fund and sending that directly to Japan, or combining funds with the remaining assets from the now shut down Reconciliation and Healing Foundation to commemorate the victims. The foundation was a Japanese-funded program that supported the so-called Comfort Women. This is the first time the South Korean government has given specifics about ways to deal with the aftermath of the 2015 Seoul-Tokyo deal. After reviewing the agreement reached by the previous government, the Moon Jae-in administration decided to include the $8 million sent by Japan in the government budget. And instead, around $8.7 million was placed in an emergency fund for gender equality operated by the Ministry of Gender Equality and Family in 2018. In November that year, South Korea shut down the Reconciliation and Healing Foundation, and the ministry pledged to come up with a reasonable solution regarding the remaining assets as well as the Gender Equality Fund. Kim Da-mi, Arirang News.
Korea's War Memorial is playing host to a special event this week in memory of those who took part in the military confrontation in the Korean Peninsula some 7 decades ago. Our Kim Bo-kyung has more.
The 8th Army Band's Melody plays in tribute to the veterans who took part in the Korean War. On October 24, 1945, the United Nations was established to ensure the common prosperity of the international community. And when the Korean War broke out in 1950, it played a key role in bringing peace to the peninsula.
Not long after the UN's creation, it activated the collective security system for the first time and intervened in the Korean War in support of South Korea, which eventually led it to contribute to the international community as a middle power country.
To thank the UN and war veterans from around the world, the memorial has come up with the very first UN Culture Week, which runs until October 24th. It features a wide range of events, including exhibitions showing the timeline of the Korean War, along with introductions of countries that sent troops.
Among the participants in the war was Colombia, the only member state in South America to officially dispatch troops to the Korean peninsula. In commemoration of the 70th anniversary of the Colombia's participation, a special exhibition was prepared.
There are also special talk sessions with ambassadors. As one of the nations of the Neutral Nations Supervisory Commission, the Polish ambassador was the first to hold a talk. Sharing the tragic story of Korean orphans who were brought up in Poland, he stressed how it is important to know the past to avoid a repeat of the tragedy.
If you find any remedy how to prevent wars, I would congratulate you wholeheartedly. No one can find it. It depends on the will of a people, and to find a compromise or consensus, not to refer to the argument of power, or rather to find a power of the argument. And this is a big difference.
Experts invited to discuss the issue of keeping peace on peninsula say it is important to remember that inter-Korean relations are a global issue.
I think our government, Korean government, should remember that we are not only focusing on North Korean issue as related to the national issues, but also putting in the international issue where we need a global cooperation to solve the problem.
Sharing gratitude and paying tribute to those from around the world who died during the Korean War, the events share hope for a peaceful future. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
It's Friday and time for a weekly check on international coverage of events here in this part of the world. As always, I have Kim Sung-yeon here to tell us more. Sung-yeon, welcome.
Nice to see you, Sunny. So today I brought in a variety of stories from the foreign media. As you can imagine, I'll start out with the Netflix series A Squid Game, and then we'll go on into the theme of defense today, including the latest debate surrounding military conscription here in Korea, as well as the major defense exhibition that's taking place right now. Also I'll be touching upon the global media reactions to North Korea's missile launch from earlier this week. So let's dive right in. According to documents reviewed by Bloomberg, Squid Game is expected to generate almost $900 million in value for Netflix. The news comes days after Netflix said the hit series had become the biggest launch in the company's history. That $900 million figure is based on a range of different benchmarks, including the number of viewers, their demographics, and how long they watched it for. 132 million people watched at least 2 minutes of the series in the first 23 days after it launched. The show is expected to generate huge returns, especially given its low budget of $21.4 million. Meanwhile, Reuters says the hit series has highlighted Netflix's potential for overseas growth, saying the success of Squid Game has investors betting on the company's plan to explore more international content to boost slowing subscriber growth.
Right. Meanwhile, as you mentioned earlier, the New York Times, has reported on conscription here in Korea and also spoken about, well, written that is about how compulsory military service is losing public support in the country.
That's exactly right, Sunny. So the New York Times says although South Korea is still technically at war with North Korea, the country is rethinking its military draft laws. Now, conscription has become very unpopular in the country, with recent surveys showing showing a steady decline in support of maintaining the current system since 2014. But despite these attitudes, the New York Times pointed out that Korea hasn't yet reached a consensus on whether the draft laws need to be changed or repealed altogether. So experts say if the system is to be maintained, sweeping reforms are needed to make military service more accommodating for the younger generation.
Right, Song-yeon. Now moving on, the Seoul International Aerospace and Defense Exhibition kicked off earlier on Tuesday for a 5-day run. What has been the foreign response to this show of might?
Yes, so Sunny, ADEX has been taking place throughout the week at Seoul Air Base, and there were quite a number of foreign journalists there, including those from the U.S., Australia, and France, trying to catch a glimpse of Korea's latest defense products. Now, the exhibition is the largest of its kind in Northeast Asia, with 440 defense companies from 28 countries in attendance. Now, fighter jets, drones, and other weapons systems were on display, including Korea's K-2 main battle tank and K-9 self-propelled gun, which have drawn a lot of interest from buyers abroad. The highlight of the exhibition was a performance by the Black Eagles, the flight demonstration team of the South Korean Air Force. Now, Reuters said the exhibition successfully showcased Korea's next-generation military technology, which could help boost exports and economic recovery from the fallout of the pandemic. Now, in the meantime, the launch of Nuri, South Korea's first homegrown space rocket, was, of course, the focus of heavy foreign media coverage as well this week. The BBC said the launch opened up a new chapter in South Korea's space ambitions, and that it could have potential military applications as well. The BBC noted that an arms race may be heating up between the two Koreas, and that both sides recently test-fired new weapons.
Right, and Song-yeon, speaking about North Korea, it also made a few headlines, as you mentioned, this week after a fresh missile testing on Tuesday.
Of course, a lot is being said about the North test firing of the ballistic submarine-launched ballistic missile on Tuesday. That was with many pundits saying it is part of the usual pattern of escalation by the regime to create political leverage. Now, Reuters noted that the North's latest missile test may be part of efforts to quickly field an operational missile submarine. Nevertheless, other experts say that the development is expected to have only a limited impact on Pyongyang's arsenal until more progress is made on a larger submarine. CNN, meanwhile, reported that North Korea's missile test came after weeks of mixed signals on the peninsula, where signs of cooperation between Pyongyang and Seoul coincided with rising tensions on the military front.
All right, Song-yeon, as always, thank you very much for the coverage.
Thank you. See you next week.
With the month of November set as the start of a gradual shift to a new normal in life here in Korea, interest is also growing with regard to overseas travel. Now, accordingly, for more on the prospects for the tourism industry, I have Professor Bae So-young from Kyung University. It's good to see you again, Professor Bae.
Thank you very much for having me again.
And also joining the session virtually is Professor Jerry Argusa at the University of Hawaii. It's a pleasure to have you with us, Professor Argusa.
Aloha, thank you for having me.
Right. Professor Bae, we'll start here in the studio then. Let's begin with some of the travel bubbles that Korea has signed with a few of its international counterparts.
So yes, as more people has got vaccinated, many countries, they actually declare to live with COVID-19 instead of actually waiting until this corona things are over and just reopen their border. And people have very high expectation about it. And currently, Korea has signed a travel bubble with two other countries, Saipan and Singapore. So first of all, over the last month, more than 4,000 people has actually purchased the travel package to Saipan. And since Saipan government offers lots of benefits to the potential tourists, including like some travel vouchers, so people even are very much motivated to travel there to Saipan. In the case of Singapore, we are able to actually travel with no self-isolate from the next month about mid-November, and it's very meaningful in that this is the very first travel bubble between the countries that have the two major aviation hubs in Asia. So it also allows the travel of individual tourists as well as package tourists, and that is very meaningful. And in fact, many other countries also have opened up their borders to fully vaccinated tourists, including like United States and Canada and some of the countries in South American regions like Mexico, Colombia, Spain, Belgium, European countries, and some other popular holiday destinations. Of course, we have to actually do the self-isolate once we return to Korea for like 2 weeks.
Right, but then when we're there in Saipan or in Singapore, it's a quarantine-free travel for those who are fully vaccinated.
Absolutely.
Do we have the option of handing in a negative PCR test if we're not vaccinated?
Yes, we have to actually hand over those negative PCR results.
As well, I see. All right, Professor Agurusa, I hear Hawaii is looking to welcome back travelers starting November 1st. Now, please tell us a bit more about this latest development, including the current COVID-19 situation there in Hawaii.
Well, thank you again for having us today. One of the challenges is, first of all, the President of the United States did just recently announce that we are going to open up. And here in Hawaii, the governor yesterday announced that he too is welcoming back non-essential travel. So that's a great thing. One of the things is that you have to have a COVID, first you have to have a vaccine card as well as a COVID negative test within the last 72 hours when you arrive to not be quarantined. So these are good things. We now are looking at hopefully get more international tourists. One of the things about Hawaii is that we were locked down for part of the year. And with that, tourism actually ceased. And because tourism is our #1 industry and our #1 employer, we went from the lowest unemployment in the United States to the highest. But now we're back open, and we're looking forward to welcoming both tourists from the U.S. mainland as well as international.
Right. Professor Agurusa, I believe the governor, David Ige, is opening up borders there to travel international travelers because COVID-19 cases in the state has dropped. Is that the case?
Yes. Well, we had a surge about 8 weeks ago. And with that, he had to take very drastic measures. He actually went on TV and asked people not to travel. But prior to that, May, June, July, we had excellent number of tourists coming, and we had a record. In July 2021, we had a record on some of the hotels with both average daily rate, revenue, as well as occupancy levels. So we really did very well. The wave came, we had a lot of tourists, and then we had a downfall. We had to shut down because the COVID cases rose very, very quickly. One of the challenges here in Hawaii is we're just a small group of islands, and we have very small hospitals. And what happens is once the hospitals get filled with COVID patients, there's nowhere else to go. You cannot transfer somebody, say, from one city to the other because there are no other cities to go to. We're 5,000 kilometers away from the next state and from the next country. So because of that, he had to take very drastic measures and just shut everything down. We actually still have some measures still in place. No more than groups of 10 inside together. Restaurants and bars have to close at 10 o'clock in the evening. And this is what was a good strategy because COVID patients stay in the hospital about 20 days. So once you have a patient in there, the challenge is they don't leave. Unlike, here in the United States, someone has a baby, they only stay 2.1 days. But the average COVID patient stays 20 days. So we just don't have the bed space inside. And in the evenings, when we have people that have accidents in the night, especially if there's any type of drinking involved, they're severe accidents and they need to be hospitalized. And there's just no room in the hospitals at that time. So that was one of the strategies on why shutting down the bars and restaurants at 10 p.m. Right. So we've done that. Right. And it's still in effect at this time. And hopefully the restaurants could only be 50% occupancy still at this time.
I see. So Hawaii is taking its precautions then. Professor Pick, Korean Air earlier this week announced plans to resume flights to Hawaii come November 3rd. Now, this resumption follows a halt in flights back in April 2020, I believe. Are we looking at an active resumption of international exchanges now?
Yes, so vaccination rates have been increased in Korea and also globally. So Korean Air announced that it will resume its international flights from Korea to Hawaii at least 3 times a week from November 3rd. And as you know, Hawaii is one of the very popular travel destinations in Korea, especially among honeymooners. So everybody is very much looking forward to it. And the aviation industry has gone through very, very tough times during this COVID-19 pandemic situation. But recently, as many countries start to open their borders, so many airline companies in Korea actually have resumed their international flights, mainly to nearby countries like Japan or countries in Southeast Asia, and also some of the major holiday destinations. And they have been working very hard on aircraft maintenance because they haven't been operating the aircraft for so long, so to ensure the safety things. But while it is very encouraging news, however, there are some of the relevant issues to deal with because the jet fuel price surge, that's serious, and also some fluctuating exchange rate as well. And also since people are still very much anxious about overseas travel due to those safety issues. So the airlines company, they will need to closely monitor the current situations as well as some external factors to ensure the safety of the passengers.
Right. And even against that backdrop, Professor Agru said the global tourism industry as a whole continues to bear the brunt of pandemic-related restrictions. How has this reality affected Hawaii?
Well, you know, we are a microcosm to the travel industry, right? Because it is our #1 industry. We are so dependent on tourism. And as I said earlier, we went from the lowest unemployment in the United States to the highest unemployment in 1 month. You know, we have about 1,300,000 folks live in the whole state, and we lost 200,000 jobs in 1 month. And with that, all of a sudden, with the pandemic, people realized just how important tourism is to the economy of the state. And as now that tourism is now opening up again, and we're opening little by little, we're still not back to where we were. We did hit 900,000 tourists for the month of July, but it's now, you know, we're still missing that international element. Most of those 99% of those tourists that came in June and July are from the U.S. mainland, and they're a different type of tourist. They were usually a lot of first-timers, and unlike the tourists that come from Asia, specifically the Japanese is our #1 international market, but also, as the professor said, the honeymoon market from Korea is very, very, very important for us. And you know, when folks are on their honeymoon, they really go out and enjoy themselves. They have a more exotic travel. They have more upscale dinners. You know, it's a honeymoon, and they spend the most money, and that's what you want as a tourist destination. And hopefully, they have an enjoyable vacation so that they'll come back for their anniversaries, etc.
Right.
And that's where we hope to set that tone.
Professor Agru, I understand, though, that you have a few concerns regarding the resumption of tourism following months of restrictions. Do you care to elaborate?
Well, one of the concerns we have to worry about is, are we gearing up? Are we ready? Now, the hotels seem to have been ready when we had the wave, but the restaurants weren't able to handle it because of the 50% capacity. We had very long lines, both for tourists as well as for the residents that wanted to eat out. And one of the biggest challenges that we had both in June and July is the shortage of rent-a-cars. And what happened is, I don't know, I sent a thing over. If we looked in, it hit, you know, international news, and it actually was in a Korean newspaper. Due to the artificial intelligence that they use at the rent-a-car places, when the rent-a-cars became so short and supply and demand, we actually had rent-a-cars renting for $1,000 a day. A convertible was renting for $1,000 a day. Now, I don't know if anybody paid that much money, but the price points just kept going up and up because of the shortage of rent-a-cars. And there's a number of reasons for that. First of all, that we didn't know how long the lockdown was going to happen. So the rent-a-cars here, because space is so limited, the car rental places only have enough space on their lot for 30% of the cars, and they consider 70% to be out. at all times. And when you had nobody coming, there was no place to put the cars. And at our Aloha Stadium we had here, there were 4,000 rent-a-cars parked there. And even if it was only $10 a day, that's $40,000 a day to just hold cars in an island in the middle of the ocean, surrounded by salt water and salt air, which is very, very bad for cars to be just sitting around. So what they did was the rent-a-car companies sold their fleets. They got rid of their cars. And then when tourism started to pick up again, there are not the availability to buy the cars. And one of the biggest reasons is because of the shortages of chips. Now with supply chain issues, as well as with the chip shortages. If anybody's trying to buy a new phone, whether it's a smartphone, Samsung, iPhone, there's huge backlogs because of the computer chips. And the same with the cars, the motor vehicles. So the motor vehicle companies, the car dealerships, don't have to sell at a discount to these rent-a-car places. So there's still a shortage of rent-a-cars. And one of the things that took off is Turo, where residents rent their car, similar to Airbnb, where people rent out their house, they rent out their car.
So that is a viable option then, having residents to rent their cars.
Yeah, we did, and it's been very, very profitable. I have a former student that lives on Maui, and she was making so much money. She said to me, Dr. Grusser, I'm going to quit my job and just get another car. And I was like, no, don't do that. This is only temporary, young lady. You stick with, she was working for a very nice hotel and she had a good job, but she was looking at it from the profitability. And, what happened is when we had the downturn, the local residents were able to go out to the beach, et cetera. And now, we have everybody working again.
Right.
And I mean, even if you're working, it's still a very beautiful place.
Right, it is. I have to agree. Professor Bae, moving beyond Hawaii then, what can you tell us about the impact of COVID-19 on the tourism industry by country?
You mean the tourism change?
Sure.
I mean the tourism trend, what's going on in this era. So, over the last 2 years, I think we have learned a lot to how, in terms of how to live with COVID-19 situation and pretty much adapt to the new normal in our daily life. So I think there wouldn't be any dramatic change in the upcoming year, but rather than that, we will just continue to live our new normal way of life. And during the pandemic, it seems that everybody feels that travel is so important in our life. So everybody realized the true value of the travel. And as more and more borders are open with the increased vaccination rate, obviously overseas travel will be expanded and increased. But in the meantime, I think the travel trend of the domestic tourism or the craze of the outdoor activities will also go on. And people will still like to spend a lot about content. I mean, they like to consume the online content to enjoy things from the online setting. And their increased need of the safety will make also people pursue more individualized, personalized travel setting, and also considering the inherent uncertainty in traveling in this era. I think people will try to focus on the quality of their time spent rather than actual quantity, how much they see, regardless of the country. And also what's truly important for them will be the memorable experience during their travel. So it could be offered either online and offline. So from the service providers' perspectives, I think it will be very important to ensure the memorable experience for all the tourists.
Right. Professor Agrus, some industry findings show that a growing number of potential travelers are looking to visit Korea once COVID-19 is under global control. Now, as a scholar in the related field, looking into Korea from the outside, what do you believe is behind this finding?
Well, there's a number of reasons, I think. And one of the biggest is that when people were cooped up, they watched Netflix. And I think that a lot had to do with the K-dramas and a number of different movies that came out during this time, and especially that were directed by, Korean directors. And, I happen to did some research about 15 years ago, starting looking at K-dramas and the movement of tourists from Japan to Korea. But I think this time it's a different generation that has been watching the K-dramas as well as Squid and again with the music, Blackpink, BTS, all these things came into play. I think that now I actually surveyed my class this afternoon, the graduating seniors, and almost half of them said they're very much interested in visiting Korea, both for the food as well as the culture.
Right. Professor Arirang, have you seen Squid Game?
I have seen it, but I didn't see the whole thing.
Okay,
I saw some of it. I actually watched part of it because of this interview.
I see. All right. Professor Pei, keeping in mind what Professor Arirang has just said, do you believe that the rave global reviews of Korea's cultural contents will serve to further boost perhaps tourism here in the country?
Absolutely. So the Netflix original drama Squid Game actually has shown a global sensation in the world, and it's just amazing. And actually the green outfit from those Squid Game, that's become a #1 popular like Halloween costume in this year. And recently, the collaborative new song from the BTS and Coldplay also has ranked at the first place in the Billboard chart. And I think K-culture has truly fascinated to all over the world. And in this pandemic, when traveling crossing borders are largely restricted, such powerful content is very important because they can actually maximize the awareness of the particular country and also boost up the positive image of Korea as well. And ultimately, it will increase the level of intention to travel to that country after this pandemic things are over or eased. So I think we have to be fully ready to welcome more inbound tourists in this living with COVID era. And tourism is not just about like sightseeing anymore, it's all about experience. So we will have to prepare very creative, authentic, and experience-based tourism contents, especially based on this K-culture wave and Hallyu. And also using the high technology such as like virtual spaces or metaverse will also be a great setting to offer very unique experience in this era.
Right. And Professor Arirang, along with the excitement over overseas travel, there is much concern over possible resurgences. What are your thoughts on this reality?
Well, I think we just found out 2 or 3 days ago that in London, they found out another variant that they're very concerned about. And I think we have to be cognitive of these types of changes. Don't forget, only 20% of the earth has been vaccinated. That means there's still 80% that still needs to be vaccinated. And until the majority of people are vaccinated, this isn't a virus that you get through drinking or touching. It's by air, and we all have to breathe. So we need to hopefully get more and more folks vaccinated. I know that your Korea has been very, very diligent, and the vaccination rates are rapidly rising. In the United States, we've had some issues. You know, we have some people that are against the vaccine, and there's still not enough folks that are vaccinated that should be. And I think that there's a number of reasons. Some people are against it, but I think some people just haven't taken the availability that's out there for that. Just to go back a quick thing from a former question, I think that another thing that's going to help bring tourists to Korea is that the Parasite movie won the Academy Award. And this was not the Academy Award for international film. This was the Academy Award for all film. And I think that that really opened up the door for people that wanted to come and see how, you know, they want to see the locations and they want to see about Korean film. And I think that that's really, really going to bring folks around because, you know, the movies is just is a window into how people learn about different cultures. And you know, here in Hawaii, yeah, we if we didn't have some of the TV shows, you know, recently we had the Hawaii Five-0 series come back, and that really increased tourists to coming here.
Right. All right, Professor Arirang, thank you very much for your kind words and your time today. Professor Pei here in the studio, thank you for your thoughts as well.
Thank you.
Right,
thank you.
well,
Nice to see you. Thank you.
Every journey begins with a single step, they say. And for our new normal, that is, amid COVID-19, that first step may be vaccination. Do take care. See you next Monday.